The sound of rain hit the roof of the Navy SEAL base like quiet drums echoing in the night sky. And every soldier inside the training hall stopped when they heard the helicopter land outside the blades, cutting through the dark wind as if slicing the silence in half, and no one knew who was coming or why. The Admiral stood near the window, his hands behind his back, his face calm but his eyes sharp like steel, and he said nothing as the door opened and a figure stepped inside the hall. The light flickered above her head, and for a second her shadow looked larger than life, as if the whole room bowed to her presence. She was small, not weak, but silent. She walked as if the air itself moved aside to make space for her every step. Slow, controlled. Certain the recruits whispered to each other. Some said she was a spy. Others said she was a myth. Someone once heard her name whispered in secret missions gone wrong. Missions that never made it to the news. Her eyes were cold, but not empty. They were full of something deeper, something heavy, something like a memory that refused to die. She looked around the hall, and for a moment everyone thought she would speak. But she did not. Her silence was louder than any voice. The Admiral turned and faced the men, his voice deep and steady. He said, "You think you know strength? You think you know fear today? You will see both in one person. This is the woman I told you about, the one who will show you what real discipline looks like. Her code name is Black Widow." The room fell silent. Some men smiled, others frowned. One laughed under his breath until she looked at him and he stopped breathing for a second. Not because of fear, but because he felt something strange, a sense that she had already seen him fail before he had even started. Black Widow gave no salute. She only nodded her head slightly, her face calm, her hands by her side. She carried no weapon, and yet every soldier felt as if she had already chosen her targets. Her calm was not peace. It was precision, and everyone could feel it in their bones. Outside, the rain kept falling. The wind carried the sound of waves hitting the shore near the base, and the smell of salt filled the air. The Admiral took a deep breath and said, "She is not here to train with you. She is here to test you, to see who among you has the heart to survive. Not just war, but truth, because truth is the hardest battlefield." One young recruit named Harris whispered to his friend, "What's so special about her?" "She looks normal." But before his friend could answer, she turned her head slightly and looked at him, and for a second, Harris felt his heart freeze. How did she hear that? From across the hall, he would never know. But he knew one thing: she was not normal. Not even close. The Admiral called her forward and said, "Widow, you may begin." She looked at him for a long second, then turned to the men, her voice calm, low, almost soft. But every word hit harder than thunder. She said, "I am not here to teach you. I am here to watch you, and those who are not ready will wish they never came here." The men exchanged looks, half curious, half scared. No one wanted to be the first to speak. No one wanted to be the first to move. She walked past them slowly, her eyes reading every face, every breath, every small twitch of fear. She stopped behind one man and whispered, "You blink too much." He froze. She smiled a small, thin smile and said in battle, "You will be dead before you even see who fired." The Admiral's lips tightened. He had seen this before, her way of finding weakness without needing to fight, without needing words. It was the same gift that had once made her a legend and a curse at the same time. The storm outside grew stronger. Lightning flashed across the sea, and for a moment her face was lit up by the white light, revealing a small scar across her cheek. No one dared to ask how she got it. No one dared to even blink. She moved like someone who had nothing left to lose, and that made her the most dangerous kind of soldier. When the Admiral dismissed the group, he asked her quietly, "Why now? Why come back after all these years?" And she said, "Because someone lied. Admiral, someone who was here that night. Someone who is still wearing your uniform." The Admiral froze, his eyes narrowed, his mind racing. He wanted to ask more, but she had already turned and walked away into the dark corridor, leaving behind only the echo of her boots and the quiet fear that something hidden had just begun to rise again. The recruits stood in silence, whispering to each other about the woman called Black Widow. No one noticed that the Admiral was still staring at the door. She disappeared through his jaw tight, his thoughts heavy. He remembered a night years ago, A mission gone wrong. A name erased from the records and a promise he had broken. Outside, the helicopter lifted into the sky, and the base lights flickered once more, as if warning everyone inside that this was not a training. This was the beginning of something that would shake the entire command. And as the rain poured harder and the thunder rolled, the Admiral whispered to himself, "She is back, and if she is back then, the truth is coming too." The morning sun rose over the SEAL base, painting the sky with soft gold and silver light while the sound of boots echoed across the training field, as the men gathered one by one waiting for orders, waiting for answers, and waiting for the woman who had already shaken the ground beneath their pride. Black Widow walked out of the shadows, her black uniform almost blending with the dark fence behind her. Her eyes fixed on the field ahead, her expression calm, like the still surface of deep water. She did not carry a weapon yet. Every man around her felt as if they were already standing in her crosshairs. The Admiral stood on the platform, his arms crossed, his face hard to read. He looked at his men, then at her, then back at his men again. His voice cut through the wind like a blade. He said, "Today you will see what happens when confidence meets skill, when pride faces silence, and when fear hides behind laughter. Today we will see who among you can face her and not fall apart." A few men exchanged glances. One whispered, "She is just one woman." Another said, "Maybe the Admiral wants to scare us. Maybe this is just a trick," but deep down none of them believed their own words. The memory of her quiet stare from last night still burned in their minds. The Admiral turned to her and said, "Widow, you have permission to engage any 5 men of your choosing. Show them what you are capable of. Show them why silence can be stronger than shouting." She nodded once. No emotion. No hesitation. She scanned the line of soldiers, her eyes moving like a scanner, reading souls rather than faces. Then she pointed at 5 men, Harris included, and said simply, "You 5 step forward." They did. Her voice carried no anger, no pride. It was just steady, like the sound of rain hitting steel. She said, "The goal is simple: survive." The men prepared to move. Harris clenched his fists, his jaw tight, sweat on his forehead. Though the air was cold, she took one slow step forward and then another. The wind carried dust across the ground, and then it began before anyone blinked. She was gone. Her movements were too fast, too precise, like smoke twisting between bodies. She ducked under a swing, grabbed an arm, turned it, and the man was down, gasping. She rolled to the side, caught another by his vest, and flipped him into the mud. Without effort, the others tried to surround her, but it was useless. She was already behind them. Every motion looked like part of a dance, one made of violence and grace. She never looked angry. She never shouted. She moved as if her body already knew the end of every attack before it began, and within less than a minute, all 5 men were on the ground struggling to stand, while she stood untouched. Her breathing calm, her eyes still cold. No one clapped. No one spoke. The field was filled only with the sound of the wind. The Admiral's jaw tightened, not from anger, but from something deeper: recognition. Maybe regret. He remembered another field long ago, another mission, another day when this same woman had saved his life and vanished into the dark, leaving behind nothing but blood and silence. She turned toward him and said softly, "Admiral, is that enough of a test? Or should I continue?" He hesitated, then said, "That will do, Widow." She nodded and began to walk away, but he stopped her. He said, "Wait, tell me something. Why come back now? Why face the men you once left?" She turned halfway, her face still unreadable, and said, "Because the one who betrayed our mission is still wearing this uniform, and I am here to find him." Her words struck like thunder. The men looked at each other, whispering, confusion spreading through the ranks, betrayal inside the base. The idea was poison, and everyone felt its sting. The Admiral stepped down from the platform, his boots sinking slightly into the wet soil, his voice low when he said, "Those are heavy words, Widow." She looked at him and said, "Heavier than the graves of the men you lost. You should know, Admiral, because you signed the report that buried them." For a long moment there was silence. Nothing but the cry of seagulls and the faint rustle of flags in the morning wind. Her words had turned the bright day into a battlefield of truth. No shots, no blood, only guilt. Then the Admiral said, "I cannot let you turn this base into chaos." She replied, "I am not bringing chaos, I am bringing memory, the kind you tried to forget." He stared at her and saw not the woman who stood before him, but the soldier from years ago, the one he thought dead, the one whose eyes once burned with loyalty and now burned with something colder. Harris stood up, wiping the mud from his face, his voice shaking as he said, "Admiral, with all respect, sir, that was not human." She moved like she knew every move before we did. The Admiral said, "Yes, she always does. That is why she was called Black Widow, because when she strikes it is already over before it begins." The men began to understand this was not training. This was a storm returning to the base that had tried to forget its own sins. As the sun climbed higher, the shadows grew shorter, but the air felt heavier. Black Widow walked toward the gate, her voice soft but clear. "I will find the truth, Admiral, even if I have to burn every lie to the ground." He did not stop her. He just watched her walk away, her figure shrinking against the bright light until she disappeared again like a ghost that came only to remind the living that some deaths never die. The night was quiet over the SEAL base, the wind gentle against the barracks and the sea whispering softly in the distance. But inside the Admiral's office, the silence was heavy, not peaceful. His mind replayed her words again and again. "The one who betrayed our mission is still wearing this uniform." The sentence kept echoing like a slow ticking clock, counting down to something he could not stop. He sat alone, staring at the file in front of him, the one marked Operation Serpent, a file that should have been destroyed years ago. Its pages were yellow from age, and the corners torn from time. Inside were names, faces, reports, and one single photograph that always haunted him. A team of 7 soldiers smiling after a mission. One of them, the woman now called Black Widow, her real name once classified, now erased from every system. He remembered the night she disappeared. A desert storm, a mission to extract a high-value target. Something went wrong. Explosions, screams, confusion, and then silence. When the dust cleared, only 2 survived, himself and her, but she vanished before rescue arrived, leaving nothing behind, not even footprints. He told command she was dead, and they believed him because it was easier to believe the lie than face the truth. Now she was back, and with her return came the ghosts he buried long ago. Outside the barracks, Harris sat with the other recruits, talking in low voices about the fight that morning. One said she moved like wind, another said she looked through me like she could see my fear, my past, everything. Harris shook his head and said, "She is not like us. She is something else. She carries something dark, something that never left her far from the others." Black Widow stood near the old training field, her eyes fixed on the sea waves crashing in slow rhythm. She closed her eyes and the memory came again. The sound of gunfire, the smell of smoke, the cries of her team one by one falling into the sand, the voice of the Admiral on the radio saying, "Extraction is coming. Hold position." But extraction never came. Instead, she saw flashes of betrayal, someone switching coordinates, someone selling them out. She never forgot that voice. She only needed to hear it once more to know. In the distance, footsteps approached. She turned quickly, but it was the Admiral. His face tired, his voice softer than before. He said, "You still remember?" She replied, "I never forgot." He sighed and said, "Then you know I did what I had to do." She looked at him coldly and said, "You mean you had to survive?" He said, "I mean I had to protect what was left." She shook her head slowly and said, "You protected yourself, Admiral. Not them, not me." He looked at her then and saw not anger but pain buried deep under years of silence. She said, "You lied to them, you lied to the families, you said we were ambushed by enemies, you never told them it was one of our own." He looked away, the shame too heavy to face. She stepped closer, her eyes sharp like glass, and said, "I came back to find the man who did it, but maybe I already found him." His heart stopped for a moment, the air between them tense like a drawn bowstring. Then she turned and walked away into the dark, leaving him with his own fear, his own guilt. Later that night, alarms sounded through the base, red lights flashing across the walls. Guards running orders shouted, The Admiral rushed out of his office only to find soldiers standing near the storage room door, broken open inside classified files, missing one of them. The same file he had looked at earlier, Operation Serpent. He clenched his jaw and whispered, "Widow." But when the cameras were checked, the truth shocked everyone. The footage showed not her, but someone else, a soldier from the Admiral's own inner circle. Captain Reeves, his closest man, his most trusted officer. Black Widow found him. First, she cornered him near the docks under the moonlight. Her voice low, calm, she said, "I knew it was you." Reeves tried to speak, but she silenced him with one look. He said, "You do not understand." She said, "I understand you sold us out for money, for promotion, for power." He said, "I followed orders." She said, "Whose orders?" He looked toward the base lights and whispered, "Ask your Admiral." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment something inside her broke, not from anger, but from knowing she was right. The betrayal had always been deeper than she imagined. She let him go, not out of mercy, but out of purpose. She wanted the truth, not blood, not yet. She watched him run back toward the base, disappearing into the shadows. She turned her gaze to the sea again, whispering to herself, "They built a lie on our graves. And now the lie will fall." At dawn, the base was quiet again. The Admiral called for a meeting. His face pale, his voice unsteady, he said, "Files have been stolen. Someone inside this base is working against us. No one leaves. No one speaks until I say so." His men nodded, unaware that the one person who already knew everything was standing right outside, listening, her mind already. 10 steps ahead, Black Widow's eyes reflected the sunrise. Her breath calm, her heart steady. She knew the game had changed. The real war was not in the field anymore. It was inside the walls of command, and this time she would not disappear until every secret was burned to ash. The base was restless that night, the air thick with tension and whispers. Every corridor carried the sound of boots and quiet orders. Soldiers, moving with hands on their rifles, unsure who the enemy really was. The Admiral watched from his office window, his reflection looking older, weaker, more haunted than before, his mind spinning with questions he did not want to ask, because every answer led back to one name, Black Widow. She was out there somewhere, unseen but never far. He knew her pattern: silence first, then movement, then truth like a shadow that never lost its target. He had once admired her, once trusted her. Now he feared her because she knew things that could destroy him. Down by the dock, the water was dark, and still the moon floating above like a cold eye, watching everything from the sky. Black Widow stood there, her hair moving with the wind, her eyes fixed on the reflection, below her hand resting on the knife at her thigh. Not for defense, but for memory. She could still see the night years ago when the betrayal began. The flash, the explosion, the voice of someone she trusted giving false orders over the radio. She had never forgotten that voice, and tonight she would hear it again. Back inside the base, Captain Reeves sat in the control room, sweating under the dim red light, the stolen files hidden inside a metal locker behind him. He thought he was safe. He thought the cameras would not catch him because he had erased the footage, but what he did not know was that Black Widow had already placed her own eyes inside the system. Tiny bugs hidden in corners watching everything. He moved his hand to open the locker, and that was when the alarm triggered loud enough to wake the entire base. Guards rushed toward the room, shouting orders. Chaos spread through the halls. The Admiral grabbed his weapon and ran toward the sound, shouting to lock every door. No one in, no one out. Reeves tried to escape through the side door, but the moment he stepped outside, she was there, standing in the rain, silent as always, her presence cutting through the darkness like lightning. He froze, his breath shaking. She said, "You stole." "The truth again," he said. "You do not understand. It is not what you think." She stepped closer, the rain sliding down her face like tears. She said, "Then tell me who gave the order." He stayed quiet, his eyes darting to the main building where the Admiral stood watching from the balcony. Their eyes met across the distance, and in that single moment she understood everything. She whispered softly, "You and him both." He whispered, "Please, I only followed orders." She said, "So did we, and we all died for it." He tried to run, but she threw her knife, not to kill, only to stop it. hit the wooden beam near his shoulder close enough to cut his sleeve. He froze again. She walked up, took the stolen file from his hand and said, "Go tell your admiral. I am coming for the truth." Reeves stumbled away into the night, his heart pounding. She opened the file under the rain. The papers wet and torn but still clear inside were orders signed by a name she already expected. Admiral Cole, the man who had once promised to protect them, the man who had left them behind. Lightning cracked across the sky, thunder shaking the sea. She looked up, whispering to herself, "It was you all along, Admiral, inside the base." He stood before the mirror, trying to calm his breath. He had seen her catch Reeves. He knew she would come for him soon. But part of him did not want to run anymore. Part of him wanted her to come because deep down he was tired of the lie, tired of carrying a secret that had eaten his soul for years. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out an old photograph, the same one from Operation Serpent, a young woman smiling beside him, her eyes bright with trust. Now those same eyes had turned cold like winter. He ran a hand over the picture and said, "I tried to save you. I swear I tried." The door creaked. He looked up and she was there, standing in the doorway, the rain still dripping from her clothes, her knife back in her hand but her voice calm. She said, "I read the file. You ordered the extraction to stop you. Left us there." "Why?" he said. "Because Command told me to." She said, "Command or you?" He looked at her, unable to speak. She stepped closer, her voice low. "I lost everyone because of that order, my team, my friends, my life," he said. "I know, and I have lived with that every day since." She stopped just inches from him. Her knife lowered, her eyes softer now but full of pain. She said, "Then help me finish it. Help me find the man behind Command. Help me find the one who gave you the order, because this is bigger than both of us." He looked at her confused, but then something inside him shifted. He saw the same fire in her eyes that once made her unstoppable. He nodded slowly and said, "Then we do it together. One last time." Outside, the sirens stopped, the base quiet again. The storm fading into mist, she turned and walked toward the door. He followed behind both of them, stepping into the darkness like two ghosts chasing the same shadow, knowing that whatever they found ahead would change everything. And as they disappeared into the night, the base lights flickered one last time, as if the past itself had just awakened from a long sleep, waiting for justice, waiting for truth, waiting for the Black Widow to finish what she started. The sky was pale gray as dawn broke over the sea waves rolling against the rocky shore like whispers of the past. The base stood silent, but not peaceful. The storm had passed yet. Something heavier hung in the air, something that felt like the calm before another kind of storm, the kind that comes from truth. The Admiral and Black Widow walked side by side through the narrow corridor, their steps slow and heavy, neither speaking, yet both knowing words would soon be weapons she carried. The stolen file in her hand, its edges wet, its ink smudged, but its meaning clear. The order to abandon Operation Serpent had come from someone higher, someone who hid behind the Admiral's name, using him as a shield. They entered the command room, the screen still glowing faintly from the night's alarms. Soldiers turned to watch them, whispers spreading like smoke through the air. She looked around at their faces. Every one of them, a soldier sworn to loyalty. And yet behind some eyes she saw fear, not of her but of the truth she represented. The Admiral said, "Everyone leave the room." They obeyed quickly. No one dared to question him when the door closed. He turned to her and said, "You have your answers now," she said. "No, I only have your side. I want the rest," he said. "You do not understand what you are walking into." She said, "I walked into fire before I can do it again." He sat down at the table, his hands shaking slightly. He said, "The betrayal did not start with me. It started with Command. Unit 7, a group that handled black missions that never existed on paper. Operation Serpent was theirs. I followed their orders until I realized too late what they really wanted. It was not an extraction. It was elimination they wanted." "Your team gone." Her eyes darkened. She said, "Why?" He said, "Because one of your men discovered something he was never meant to see. He found evidence of secret deals between our own officers and private mercenary groups. He threatened to expose them, and Command decided to erase the entire team to make sure the secret died in the sand." Her voice turned cold. They killed us to protect themselves. He nodded slowly, his guilt like a shadow on his face. He said I tried to call extraction. I begged them to change the order, but they shut down my access. They told me if I spoke again I would join you in the desert. She said, and you chose silence. He said I chose survival. She said, then you chose betrayal. The wind howled outside, shaking the window frames. She turned away, her eyes on the horizon where the sun began to rise. She said, you could have warned us. He said, I tried to send a signal, but they intercepted it. I swear I tried. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the explosion, the screams. The burning sand, she whispered. Your signal never reached us, only the fire did. For a while, neither spoke, the sound of the sea filling the silence like a heartbeat. Then he stood and said, Widow, we can still make it right. The man behind Command Unit 7 still exists. His name is General Mason. He was the one who signed the kill order if we expose him. This ends. She turned her head slightly, her face unreadable. She said, then we go after him. He said it will not be easy. Mason is not like others. He has his own army, his own rules, his own ghosts, she said. Then he will not see us coming because ghosts fight in silence. He nodded and said, then we start tonight. Before they could move, the door burst open. Captain Reeves entered, his face pale, his breath heavy. He said, Admiral Mason already knows. He knows you are coming. He sent men here. They are already inside the base. The Admiral drew his weapon and said, how long ago? Reeves said 10 minutes, maybe less. Black Widow's eyes narrowed. She moved toward the exit, her voice calm but sharp like a blade. She said, then the hunt begins now. Outside the base engines roared. Lights cut through the mist, shadows moving fast through the fences, heavily armed mercenaries sent to erase the last witnesses of the operation. She moved through the smoke like wind, precise, fast, invisible. Every shot from her weapon hit its mark. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The Admiral followed behind, covering her flank. His years of command replaced by the instincts of survival. They fought side by side again, not as commander and soldier, but as two broken souls bound by the same truth. The gunfire echoed through the base, sparks lighting the darkness as men fell one by one. She reached the main yard where a black truck waited, its doors open. Inside, a man with gray hair and cold eyes sat watching through the scope of his rifle. It was Mason himself, calm, confident, certain of victory. She stepped into view, her eyes locked on him, the same way they once locked. On targets miles away, she called out Mason. He smiled slightly and said, I thought you died. She said, I did. Now I am what your lies made me. He fired. She moved faster than the bullet. The shot missed. She rolled to the side and fired back, hitting the weapon from his hands. He staggered back, the Admiral running behind her, shouting. Widow stopped, but she kept walking toward Mason. Her voice calm but deadly. She said, you ended my life once, you will not do it again. Mason raised his hands, surrendering, his smile fading as she stopped inches from him. Rain dripping from her face, her eyes fierce. She said, the truth dies tonight, or you do. Which one will it be? He looked at her and said, you cannot fight all of us. She said, watch me. And as thunder cracked above and sirens wailed again across the base, the past and present collided in one moment of silence before the next storm began. The storm raged across the coast, lightning tearing the sky apart as rain poured down on the SEAL base, washing the blood and smoke into the sea. The air was filled with the echo of gunfire and the smell of burning metal. The night alive with chaos as soldiers and mercenaries fought across the yard under flashes of light that made every shadow look like a ghost. From the past, Black Widow moved through the wreckage like a phantom. Her eyes locked on one target, General Mason, the man who had destroyed her life, the man who had turned truth into death. He was retreating toward the command tower, guarded by men in dark armor, their rifles flashing with every burst of light. She dodged between walls, her boots splashing through puddles, her hands steady, her heart calm like a clock ticking toward the end. The Admiral followed close behind, his voice hoarse from shouting commands, his mind torn between duty and guilt. He had chosen to fight beside her, but every time he saw her move, he remembered the woman she used to be, the soldier. He betrayed the friend he lost. He wanted to tell her everything, but now was not the time. She reached the tower door and kicked it open, her body moving like instinct. Her weapon raised, her breath slow. The hallway beyond was dim, lit only by emergency lights blinking red like dying stars. She walked forward quietly, each step echoing in rhythm with the thunder outside at the far end of the hall. Mason waited, his hands clasped behind his back. Calm, as if he had already won, he said, "You should have stayed dead." "Widow," she said, "you should have never lied." Mason said, "The world needs lies, it runs on them, truth only destroys." He took a step closer and smiled. "I gave you your legend, your name, you were never supposed to exist. But we made you into something that could never be erased." She said, "You made a weapon, not a person," Mason said, "and you became exactly what we needed. Silence, fear, control." She lowered her weapon, her voice soft but sharp. "You used me to kill your enemies. Then you killed my team to hide your crimes." Mason shrugged and said, "Sacrifices must be made. Heroes are built from the dead." She walked closer, her eyes burning like fire. He raised his pistol, aiming for her heart. She did not flinch. She said, "You never understood power, Mason. It is not in killing. It is in knowing when not to." The Admiral entered behind her, gun raised, shouting, "Mason, drop it now." Mason laughed, that same cold laugh from years ago, the one that echoed in her memory when the desert burned around her. Mason turned to him and said, "You should thank me, Admiral. I saved your career, I saved your life." She said, "You saved no one. You only buried truth." Mason looked at her and said, "Truth is nothing but a word." She stepped closer until they were face to face, rain dripping from her hair down to her jaw. Her voice quiet, but cutting through the noise like a blade, she said, "Then remember this word, Black Widow." The name froze him. His eyes widened. He staggered back as if struck. That one word carried every sin, every secret, every death. It was the name of the program. The name of the lie. The name that ended everything she had lost and everything he had built. She whispered again, "Black Widow," and fired once. The shot echoed through the hall like thunder. The bullet hit the wall beside his head. She had missed on purpose. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Mason dropped his gun, his breath shaking, his pride shattered. He said, "You should have killed me." She said, "Not yet. You will face the world you created. You will face what you tried to erase." She turned to the Admiral and said, "Call them, call command, call the press, call whoever still believes in truth, because this ends now." Outside, the storm began to fade, dawn breaking over the horizon. Soldiers, standing in silence around the yard, the fighting stopped. The mercenaries captured the truth, spreading like fire through the ranks, whispers turning into voices, voices turning into shouts. They knew now what had been hidden for years, the betrayal, the lies, the blood. The Admiral stood beside her as helicopters arrived, lights flashing across the wet ground, men in suits stepping out to arrest Mason, his eyes full of disbelief. As they took him away, she stood there watching him vanish into the cage of justice, her face calm, her eyes distant, the wind blowing strands of hair across her scar. She looked at the Admiral and said, "You wanted to test me, now you know the answer." He said, "You were right from the beginning. I was blind." She said, "No, you were afraid. Fear builds more graves than bullets, Admiral." He nodded, unable to speak. She turned to walk away toward the shore, her boots sinking slightly into the wet sand, the waves touching her feet as if the sea itself was greeting her return. He called after her, "Where will you go?" She said, "Anywhere. The truth still breathes." He said, "They will write stories about you." She said, "They already did, but none of them were true now. Maybe one will be." She paused, looked back once, her eyes soft but strong, and said, "Goodbye, Admiral." He said, "Goodbye, widows." She walked into the light of morning. The world around her seemed to hold its breath. The sea calm again, the sky clearing from the storm, her figure fading with each step until she was gone, leaving behind only the echo of her name, the one word that had changed everything. The one word that ended lies and began. Freedom. Black Widow.